Hello, hello. This is the second series to WDNAME. We don't need any more evidence. Hey, our name is divinenurux. We are the author of this series, and this series, part 2, is titled How America Almost Killed Us. But won't they do it? They, of course, being God. Now, the subtitle reads, A Few Other Ways in Which We Can Exemplify Fortitude and Integrity and Do Better as More Than a Nation, but as United Nations. All names of celebrity people mentioned did not prepare, approve, or endorse / authorize this book. Their artwork is just inspiring in general. 'Tis all. No disrespect or infringement intended. Copyright 2021 by the Anons Productions, LLC. All rights reserved. No part of this publication may be reproduced, distributed, or transmitted in any form or by any means, including photocopying, recording of other electronic or mechanical methods, without the prior written permission of the publisher, except in the case of brief annotations embodied in critical reviews and certain other non-commercial uses permitted by copyright law. This is in accordance with the U.S. Copyright Law of 1976. Thank you for your support of the author's rights. For permission of publication requests, write to the Anons Productions, LLC, i.e. theanonsproductions.com, with the subject of, quote, attention, permission coordinator WDNAME, end quote, at the address above. First edition, February 2021. The publisher is not responsible for websites or their content that are not owned by the publisher. Printed in the United States of America. First distribution, 2021. First printing, to be determined. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the existence of family and friends that try to understand us. Truth is, we're still transitioning out of who we expected to be for everyone else to someone who we can entirely be within, and still be loved and present to those who are loved and present to us. Thank you to our parents for showing us what longevity and love looks like. Thank you to our brother for restoring our balance and respect of cool for being our rock. Thank you to J. Plume for being our mirror. Thank you to 3, Indy, and Ye for being more soul sisters than we could even imagine. Thank you to our line sisters for accepting us back with love and open arms after we dipped from life just to grieve. Thank you, Godma, for showing us that we too are waiting to exhale. Thank you, Sugar, for continually showing us that happiness is based in knowing that love is not based in need, yet self. And friendships are just the icing on the cake of life. There are so many more we can thank, including several homeless men we met on travel that helped us to see that our perspective was very flawed. This is Fernery. Preface. It's tiresome being Black in America, being bi in America, being queer in America, being a woman in America. And yes, that is with an X. Shit. It's just hard to be, yet alas, we are blessed to say, here we are. But we have been saved time and time again, twice in religion, and duplicitously in the favors and blessings of life and spirit. God, if you will. Jah, Yahweh, Buddha, Selassie, Black Jesus, Shiva, Allah. Insert your preferred ideal of divinity here. We personally reference God in the they sense, since it makes more sense to us, and that's that. You may differ in opinion, and that's cool. Side note, we can disagree and still show respect for each other. The sun will continue to shine. The moon will continue to light the night sky. We will both find love if we're open to it. And we both can have wonderful lives, perfectly while in disagreements. With respect, a lot of shit can get better. Yet that's just another story. Let's discuss this near eulogy turn autobiography really quick. BRB. Enjoy. Divine. Death. In general and specificity. Part 1. In general. Let's acknowledge death. In the most non-emo way we can state this, side note, for we truly love life and don't get us confused. Death is always there. It's slick the most dependable thing any of us got. Yet that's not to dismiss all the other dependable things we got in this life, like spirit, like love, like the need for water or death, the need for food or death, albeit a slower one than without water, the need for love, even if only from yourself, or emotional death, the need and availability of/for oxygen or death. See? We got a lot of things to depend on. So what do we really mean when we say we're alone? That nobody has our backs? That we feel we are talking yet no one is listening? That love is not felt? We are really thinking about our need to express, and for that expression to be realized as valid by someone or something else. We're truly a communal people. Isolation works for the few that have forgone the want of community, either healthily and out of the need for feeling complete within oneself, or unhealthily and out of lack of respect, trust, and or openness. Isolation kills more than it is realized to. Ask the mind of the closest socialite you know in the midst of the 2020 pandemic. Death can occur in more ways than one. Part 2. In specificity. We nearly died when we were 4. We suffered from epilepsy, a neurodivergent configuration, while we tended to shake as if our little body was touched by a live wire. We don't remember it much. The hospital took us in and saved us, we're sure. Or the sensation just left our body and spirit alone, naturally. Growing out of it. Who knows? Side note, well, our folks might. What we do know is we developed a fear of hospitals sometime after. Maybe it's good we don't remember. We're cool with acknowledging the notion that our brain may be protecting our psyche. Side note, yes, we are distinguishing the amazingly complicated gray mass in our skulls, in all its physical components, from the metaphysical aspects that are harnessed through and by it. By reducing our quickness and recall, or for our fellow tech geeks, encouraging our latency. Side note, once a geek, always a geek. We're geeky and proud, gosh darn it. God took their time on us, y'all. And they took their time on your amazing self, too. Okay, back to deaths. We'll wrap this up. This part can be a little triggering and or morose, so be forewarned. We nearly died in a car accident. We were at fault in 9th grade. Side note, it was rainy and we were a brand new driver. It was bad. We know. It gets worse, so stay with us here. We nearly died in another car accident, at fault again in college. Side note, this time, life got real and shit hit the fan. Quick. That's all we'll say here. Safe to say, we didn't drive too much for a period of time. We were thinking of getting a cruiser bike and one of those fancy SUVs with all the self-driving and cautionary tech, and some roller skates. One crashes a few times, and one might start to get a thought about oneself, especially if one doesn't give themselves a little break, i.e. grace. The streets are safe, well, from us, and we're considering the least of most worries. We're considerably the least of most worries on these streets. Talking about the streets, we nearly died by shame. If you don't think this is a real thing, look up mercy killings by East Asian soldiers and swordsmen in battle, or hush. Or just ask a member of the LGBTQIA community who lost someone they loved because that someone wasn't receiving the love they needed by the loved ones they held dear in their life, or hush. Or just realize that to invalidate someone's feelings are rude, and hush. Merci toi en l'amour. The will to live is a discussion piece altogether. Yet let's stick a pin in this thought. What can even cause our shame, one might ask? After all, we were raised in the middle to upper middle socioeconomic class in America. Our parents stayed together, and they exhibited the strength, self-identity, and awareness that seemed to run rampant in those that experienced the 90s, the Civil Rights era, Soul Train in the 70s, bell bottoms, and love. We had a nice home in the suburbs. My brother and we tested into private and charter schools, and out of the unfortunately trodden and uninvested schools in our community that lagged behind other schools in the county and nearby cities. Side note, this truly is a terrible thing, though. Why leave to where the grass is greener when we can water our own? We're coming back to this, so stick a pin in that thought as well. As you can see, we was grown in the proverbial lap of luxury, yet our brain didn't see that. Side note, this is why mastery of your thoughts are so important to living and being well. Because our depression should not have happened in your opinion, of what is considered worth struggling with. Though our feelings were and are very much valid, according to those looking in on our life and comparing it to themselves that went through more physical pressures and apparatuses by perception than we. Yet it did. Realize that just because someone doesn't go through the same trauma or worse that you did, it doesn't make their pain lesser than. The logic in that way of thought is in itself fallacious and dangerous. Lesser than whose exactly? What or who is the comparison point of pain? You? Who are you to decide that your experiences are the standardized threshold for pain to which others must measure against? Those who feel presumably lighter should be disregarded. How can anyone be so mistaken that their experience should or can be the standard of a comparison for anyone outside of them? Especially when there is so much more at play. Willpower, community, i.e. friends, family, support, access, mentality, needs, so much more. Truly empathize by just listening. Not all things warrant external approval. Our brain saw isolation. Our father was doing his best to be home, unlike what he saw of his father, who didn't have a father figure to teach of how to be present as a black father, yet missing family dinners, which was the only time any of us ever saw each other in our busy days of doing our best at achieving black excellence, because he had to be black excellence to procure all the money he could, and wealth and knowledge, so that we could all live in peace. Side note, We loved every moment he was there and missed him every moment when he wasn't. Our mother kept us, my brother and we. With both his and her love, though, we were blessed, and we are so grateful for what she was strong enough and blessed enough to do. We saw the pressure, yet simply understood it was a standard to be Black excellence, because we all knew you had to work twice as hard to stand a chance against the white or whitewashed eye of approval. Whether that eye is the hiring manager at the company you want to work for, so you ought to dress the part to even simply step into the door, or that eye is of the person you got a crush on, yet whose ideals have been coerced by the whitewashed idealistic styles of beauty. You had to work hard. Side note, like so hard that you walk and work till your feet may bruise, all while holding back anger due to microaggressions experienced at work so long that your clenched fists may be so second nature. It may be convincing to say, quote, all my life I had to fight, end quote, like Celie in The Color Purple. Yet don't you show a cheer because your ancestors were beat back broke over merely existing and survived hard. And who wasn't trying their goddamn best to be it? The ideal Black excellence. We went from a tap dancer to a ballet dancer to an A student in nearly all classes. Side note, a few B's in grade school and a C or two when we got disillusioned and really just didn't give a fuck 1 year or two in college. Yet parents didn't know, so we were straight in that regard. And we still graduated with a 3.5 something. So who ain't Black excellence? A trained swimmer, a near shoo-in for Olympic trials. Side note, we're dead ass. We were 2 seconds behind Phelps's qualifying time when we were in high school. We just hated the hierarchy and winning at the expense of others in competition. Did we care too much about others? Maybe. We'll touch back on that. A grade A student of writing, loved nearly by all professors, a civil engineering student, a mechanical engineering student, a tutor of engineering and math to those in higher educations than we, a computer science student, one of the first Black females of the computer science, to work at the federal government facility in our alma mater city. Side note, at least that's what we've been told, and there were actually 2 of us at the same time. Shout out to our fellow Greek sis, Jay. A member of Greekdom, one of the presiding members of that sisterhood shortly after, a dean. A little side note. Yep. Just so y'all know. A graduate in 4 years, despite all those major changes, though folks thought it was impossible. Suffered through depression, our second to last year and a half of college, graduated, became a project manager or a scrum master to our tech folks at the tender age of 22, then became the first dual developer manager the team has ever seen, quit out of depression once realizing that wasn't the truest version of us, and that battling all the conditioning that even got us to a place where we didn't even know who we were without the accolades. And now here we are. Who didn't break their back to be Black excellence? Because we know what we've been through. Lord, Lord, Lord. If you made it all the way through that whole passage of us tooting our own horn, as they say, we got so much love for you. We got love for everybody, regardless. Yet you took your time like that. Oh, we Gucci. Also, we suggest everyone to toot their horn sometimes. It feels good to congratulate and celebrate yourself. So here's the thing. We were confused as fuck. Let anyone tell you, anyone who really saw us under the guise of Black excellence and beauty and dancer body and feminine guile, we was taught to use all of that to our benefit. Yet truly, didn't know who was benefiting. The only person we want to sleep with, we mean mostly, hello sex positivity, was ourselves. And we woke up to ourselves. And when we stopped working or being busy long enough to think and be in tune with ourselves, we realized we were empty. Yet at the same time, we were a levee holding together its own breach. We didn't know us. And therefore, we attracted many people who didn't know themselves either breaking their back to make others' lives better while leaving their time and needs on the back burner, all while still attempting to make time for themselves as well, and mostly failing. Or we were avoiding people and trying to get our money, minds, and lives together in selective isolation because we saw how fucked up the world can get and just opted out of it into our little corners of self-made havens. And that's a whole nother story. So yeah, we realized we were living in a complete contradiction to ourselves. No wonder we attracted toxicity. So yeah, we were a competitive swimmer, 2 seconds away shy of the Olympics, side note. And we just want to say, when you think you're at your physical prime and pulling all the tricks to shave off milliseconds, 2 whole seconds are a very large amount of time. Ask our mama. We were trying to figure out every new technique out there to drop those seconds to place in races. Yet, we realized we truly hated competition, so we left competitive swimming. Still a fish, always a fish. In the early days of college, we came to a point in our civil engineering route where we had to take a class about dirt. Albeit, it is and was and continues to be definitely important to those who are scientifically ideating how to build things so they won't sink in the ground. It just wasn't for us at the time. Side note, we know a lot better now and how important dirt is to the grounding and flourishing of those that grow in and of and on top of it. So we transitioned from civil engineering to mechanical engineering. We had a thing for studying and mastering hard subjects. What can we say? We felt better when we quietly succeeded at things that others deemed impossible. Yet, we realized later that it was all to receive acknowledgement, for we, ourselves, truly gave no fucks about what we studied, except that we needed to pass, because our mama said so. And if we didn't, and she found out, that was our ass. So we came to a point where we realized we didn't like the collective mind and ideology of the engineer as we knew. Not everything needed to be approved upon. And, quote, partying, unquote, with white men, side note, boys or man-childs, all day, because that's what networking is called in the engineering world at the time. Side note, and business, in any white male-dominated arena in general, was not a favorite thing to do in our past time. And one thing we did know was that we were about to enjoy our life and make coin. And so, though computer science attracts some very interesting and not necessarily social people, we suck it through. We realized we couldn't just taste the rainbow our whole life. Or maybe we could. Side note, sick of painting that potentially gay-ass reference for later. So we graduated. Damn near with the top of the class. We used to care about rankings, and by this point, side note, we've had several bouts with depression and health issues, so we were disillusioned out of the sheltered way of life we've grown up with. We realized the shit can get shiesty real quick. God forbid. So we was over it. We just wanted to get a degree and stack our coin, fall in love and peace. Y'all could have all the other depressive life shit. Yet then life kicked in love, and heartbreak, and some more depression. and more love, this time twice within a much smaller and faster time frame. Side note, and the last time progressed pretty fast. Anywho, like promise ring on our hand and 2 months of meeting you fast, and we just knew it wasn't good timing for us. Yeah, we obliged. Yeah, we acquiesced into relationships back then. We realize now that it was out of a need to share and receive the love that we weren't feeling internally, or observing from the love from our friends and family. So, shit got messy. We had a failed abortion, a definite miscarriage, and we wanted to die out of the severity and shame and pain of the situation. Because that's what Christianity backed. Who were we to kill? Then we had to wake up. No one was going to save us, necessarily. See, side note, any more than showing up and giving us support, which honestly helped our will tremendously, mind you. No one was going to save us because they weren't supposed to. Who were they supposed to save us from? Ourselves. Wasn't that our job? Our tendency to see danger and look it in the face and still walk toward it. Our tendency to acquiesce into our own potential destruction by not discerning what was good and what was taking. Side note, younger me wasn't used to people taking advantage of nice qualities. Either I, our daddy, our brother, our grandma, or our cuz would beat you up immediately. Yet, the tendency for people to estimate our weakness due to our slim frame and loving attitude, eventually they all realized they ought not to. Or we just left. Poof. See, Don't Quit, a wonderful poem that a lot of Black Greeks know, yet not nearly as much as Invictus, which is another great poem of endurance and willpower, was repeated to the point of mantra in our head during our down moments. We had to rediscover our nature, because our nature was pushing us to destruction as we knew it, and we weren't even aware of why. So here's a peek into what passed through our brain during this discovery period. The world needs an audit, the financial or economical. Shit really goes left quickly out here, sometimes. Like when the world's economy shuts down in a matter of days over an outbreak of a bacteria. And it shuts down so fast, science cannot even keep up unless the whole world just stand still while they figure it out in a frenzy themselves. Yet, two frenzies of the scientists rushing against the clock and the minds of the people as they watch the clock grow even more weary and crazed, atop all the human rights infringement issues happening around the world. Ce n'est pas bon. And then the world stays shut down because of a lack of agreement of politics and other things. Then you have couples, men, women, and non-binary loves, and children who are out on the street because living check to check is like being young and Black, taking a hot bath and relaxing. Then your mama comes in and you realize you didn't take the chicken out of the freezer like she asked. You better dry off and grease down before you feel that imminent pain, like a paddle on a wet backside. Like the proverbial rug that can get pulled out from under you quick out here. It's life. You have to be prepared. So let's perform an audit, shall we? At the time of the publishing of this book, nearly 80% of those in the United States live check to check. And we are including the rich. Side note, of course not the wealthy, who are living exactly at their means. This scenario knows no socioeconomic class. Wealth management is an error for many. Side note. Pro tip. It is suggested to only live on 1/3 of your income. Need proof? Ask Dave Ramsey or the many wealth management specialists who have managed portfolios, mine included, in all ranges of financial peaks and valleys. So is it hard? That word in and of itself is perspective. So perceive that you can either live a life of financial hardship or a life of financial bliss. You decide. Yet, it's not that easy, no? How to accomplish this, one may ask. Be a producer. Not necessarily in the music and beats type of way, yet that's wonderful. Yet also in the, if I'm going to buy it, I can produce it or sell it type of way. Let me tell you, the economy looks with so much more compassion upon the business folk than the, quote, common folk. And that's disregarding in a whole nother way. The former, they benefit from, i.e. taxes and economic stimulation. The latter, they take care of, or don't. You decide based off your own experience. Side note, we should all stop being so afraid of taxes. And we are aware that we're saying that from the side of, quote, we've been blessed with the ability to not be stressed in doing so. And we very much understand that privilege. We weren't all dealt the same deck of cards. Yet it's what you do with it that counts more. Watching the spades players we know, our mom, our brother, be able to bag opponents who were dealt twice better hands helped us teach that. Help us learn that. See, money is the root of mental instability or stability, depending. Trust us, we've seen and experienced it. Yet for those who do got it, it's pretty petty and small-minded to avoid paying those dues. Because the lawyers and tax specialists that are price gouging you to ensure that you don't pay the money to the government, that even authorize your business to be legitimately recognized in the first place, are taking a pretty sizable chunk that the government would have taken anyway. Unless we're speaking of companies whose tax owage can keep afloat a small country, then, not gonna lie, we get it. Money is nice to stack. Yet we are blessed to bless others. Because when we don't, we have dumb shit happening like lack of wealth distribution and people who don't have access to basic healthy living conditions. We never understand why we can casually say to ourselves to be grateful to have clothes on our backs, food on our tables, and roofs over our heads. Don't get us wrong. We thank God and our family every day for our blessings and compare it to how so many others don't have it and are struggling just to exist. Yet we don't help them. And maybe this is spawned from our father's childhood in the Bronx with our grandma who single-handedly raised her sons on paper, yet, unbeknownst, leaned on our sons for the support she needed from a partner. The phenomena of women, Black women, leaning on their sons and daughters to aid them to raise their younger daughters and sons and subconsciously inflicting upon them the needs they really crave from a partner is a whole nother story. God bless our grandma. Both of them. Yet anywho, those in lower economic stages don't have such privilege and access, or even have something to give. So those that can, should. American wealth legends, like Carnegie and Rockefeller, understood that generosity unburdened the heart from the receipt of such blessings. So catch up, y'all. We gotta do better. And in regards to taxes and economy, it gives on those with the money to pay for it, yet without the wherewithal to understand that it can be avoided. The fear of the, quote, tax man, end quote, is real, and it's been real for a long time. Side note, see Kendrick Lamar's frantic chant about how, quote, the tax man's coming, end quote. Or look at any old cartoon about old kingdoms and peasants, giving their last for reference. This isn't new. History always repeats. So, if we state a problem, we will always come to a solution. Period. We're not messy. Or at least we do our best to clean them up after we make them. And that's also how our parents in Greekdom raised us. And grandma and grandpa and every family and friend in between. The world needs an audit. Problems that need solving. Problem, living check to check. Solution, start a business or buy or franchise one or just sell some shit. Don't know how or what it needs? It's okay. Here's a quick outline. Identify what business you want to do. Identify its need or risk no profit and the community is geared for. Get an experienced business counselor and consultant. Create an initial business plan. Don't worry, it will change, so don't be a perfectionist. Do something. Stop waiting for the perfect moment. Time's a wasting. Every business needs, for the most part, management, promotions, marketing, accounting and revenue, service operations, human relations, legal and compliance, and in this age of digital, tech, support, services. Upkeep and maintenance of, and that's it, for the most part. This is very simplified. A business most of all needs fortitude of mind for governance sublime. That's the basis of any and most businesses. It will be expounded upon later. And how do we know this? Because we help suggest structural organization for businesses in our part-time. One of them receives newsworthy and noteworthy acclaim. You might have heard of them. So find specialists in fields that you need to step into and make it happen. Get funded. Learn that to make money, you tend to have to spend it first. It's called the law of reinvestment. Side note, we might have just made that up. It's hella valid though. Consider it ideated then. If you really want to be a step ahead of the game, create a business around a passive income generating product. Something that can be automatically sent per purchase, no movement on your part. Then you can literally make money in your sleep. And who doesn't like sleep? Put the work in up front, and the bag will chase you on the back end for as long as you wish and desire. We're all putting in work. Why not invest in yourself to reap your own multiplicitous reward? You know what I'm saying? But for those who are still fretful, withdrawn, and are iffy, there is already in the work a business development program for you. Soon come. The world needs an audit, the personal. Now, we do recognize that that starting point is not as near. Economically, physically, mentally, spiritually, or any combination of these, to all as it is to some. So let's discuss the afflictions that we have personally seen stop others. For we have been pushing others to do what their wildest, most loving and constructive dreams can realize since we were a child. We just didn't know it. Or really, side note, or really what we were doing at all when we first started, but that's neither here nor there. Common response, quote, I don't even have dreams. I'm just trying to live, end quote. We won't even state that this is a problem, for the seriousness is seeping through the blatant realism of the ideal. Some people are just crushed or meticulously steered out of their natural creativity, their spirit. Life can suck the joy out of us all, just as much as it can restore it. And as beautifully said during the Warnock campaign, and we are paraphrasing like hell, side, quote, we cannot achieve our dreams if we're struggling to survive, end quote. Side note. And some people just choose happily to not give a fuck. Kudos to happiness and livelihood. Ego is connotated to note intense feelings of uncontrolled passion or affliction. Yet ego is simply anything that uproots you, including the fear that accompanies the need for stability. The need for stability is not terrible, nor should it be despised or ridiculed. According to Maslow and many other philosophical and psychological peoples, the need for basic necessity is in any and all of us. It's why we wake up, why we work, and more. And the ways in which we procure the solve to that needs affects. And the ways in which we procure the solve to that need affects how we view others, ourselves, and more so the vitality and success of our lives and ourselves. A lot of fucking pressure on how you're going to eat your next meal, huh? No? Well, that's because you know where and how you will gather your next meal. For those whose privilege is such access is few and far in between, the space and time to dream is marred to nothingness sometimes by the near pharaoh need to survive. Side note, not calling anyone in any way pharaoh in particular, simply acknowledging that if resources were few and freedom looked supreme, we'd all turn to some of our worst devices, or at least we'd be tempted to, i.e., the purge. Does one really think thoughts will be endorsed to invest and patent the next amazing invention? Does one really think thoughts will be endorsed to invent and patent the next amazing invention that will, albeit, provide security to such a person if marketed well and consumed by those whose lives is improved in abundance, when such a person is cold, hungry, not knowing of who to call to care for them in the time of need? Maybe even has a family they put on their back to take care of along with themselves. No, they may not. The capacity of the mind is focused on more immediate needs and perils. And that's why geniuses die in the ghettos and slums every day. The slums, shanty towns, and ghettos that wealth and mismanagement produced and had the audacity to decide what sector of the hierarchy in our lands. Interclassism, racism, casteism, homophobia, and pretty much any divisive hatred that encourages this believer that someone is less than them shall bode formative periods of their lives there. The real problem? The coerced maltreatment of those who are looked down upon within society, who then internalize the poor image of themselves and identify with it and seldom reach anything past it, traverse past a certain point of will lost. Whether they achieve monetary gain or not, the lack of contentment in their own successes are forever imminent in their mind. For, subconsciously, they don't realize it is deserved by them. How would you feel if you broke through and made success for yourself, yet all your loved ones are so barely living above the poverty line? Would you be at ease? No? Side note. And this unease is one of the many uneases that those in the Black community go through. In combination of continued pressure over time and poor eating habits because of living in a food desert and or living just barely more than needed to bring in the next dollar, is more probable to lead to the physical illnesses faced by our community. We're stressed. Stop blaming it on our genes, though some are generational traumas and inheritance. Some people also just live in ways that aren't agreeable to them, whether that is with or without access to resources. Disease is also environmental. communal. Combine that with not getting love from someone in your community except for the Black boys, whose predecessors as gang culture actually rivaled more the community building nature of the Boy Scouts than what it looks like today. Or finding out you're gay or otherwise non-straight in the Black church, where deviance from the book is deviant and being societally bashed, banished, and shamed. Or being one of darkest skin tone, and learning to attribute lack of attraction, not necessarily ugliness, yet we live with a primarily binary view of the world, with the richness of melanin in your skin because those of lighter skin natures are sought after. This, side note, this is pre-Black Renaissance. Dark-skinned women are now comfortably sitting more than before in their own natural beauty. Yes, queen. And gay means happy. So the external burdens of the world are getting left at the threshold of gaydom, for one's perception of you is their own. We're mirrors. Once again, yes. And you pretty much got a good look at how fucked up people can get, feel, and are treated. So a realer solution? What is imperative to understand is that life can kill you. Or you can become strong, you can kill it. Proverbially, of course. To one whose life has been a myriad of failed attempts and sheetloads of those who appear superior, additionally raping the mind of possibility held within, one's brain may become one's worst enemy. Even though the goal of such actions is actually out of self-protection and self-preservation. Dreams may be squelched, fantasies may be tossed, outspokenness may be quieted, all in hopes to protect one from confrontation, which is seen and identified as harmful and should be avoided. But to those who are raised in comfort and abundance, do not necessarily have such issues. Not to say that such a child has none at all, for simply because one doesn't have the same strife as the other does not mean that one does not have strife at all. Simply different strifes. Yet nonetheless, such a child that does not have to be the progression of unlearning the ways of poor self-image and other fear-based actions and motives that keep the majority of people afraid of the steps needed to actualize their better selves. The road to achieving abundance and bliss is but one stage shorter. And that stage is bountiful of enough struggles and mishaps to last a lifetime if one is not careful. So, the solution? Everyone who is willing should have access to the knowledge that helps in this regard. The importance of self-actualization and understanding that you, just like any other, has a chance, more than a chance, to own their success and joy in their way that best agrees with them. Why? Because the world would be a little better if we all realized we could operate within our dreams and still produce a livelihood. Think of all the stress-related suicides, cancers, heart attacks, and more it could remedy. Yet how is this done? As a child, we grew to understand how much we can be ourselves by the support that our environment, nature, nurtures us to have access to. If you're in an environment that enables you to make mistakes that herald discontent, physical pain, emotional pain, and more, most will bet on the fact that one will grow up pretty fucked up and unwilling to make mistakes. Therefore, they will most likely not try any thought that deviated from the norm ever again. They may still find happiness, just not true, full self-expression. Thought process, quote, to deviate is to be deviant, end quote. Not many emotionally capable and mature creatives and entrepreneurs coming out of that group, don't you think? So one may have to enter a process of unlearning. And unlearning encompasses reassessing everything you know so as to see what believed knowledge and actions actually benefit you and which need to be dismissed and let go. One should definitely show respect to all and everyone that taught the lessons, emotions, and fears. Yet respect and obedience are not one and the same. They are only confused to be. So, to aid the Black man in understanding himself well enough that he knows he deserves more than being a target, he deserves more than to be a target. Teach him the rules of law that will protect him against the police, men and women, in both the eyes of the people and the legal, local, and state institutions, so that the disease of self-disdain can be dealt away. Side note, we see you, Kaepernick, with your wonderful nonprofit on teaching civilian rights and how to handle oneself with the police. The feeling of disdain that affects everything from his undealt with feeling that he cannot protect himself and therefore cannot protect the family that he won't even allow himself to have because he himself has never seen a coherent, loving family structure in the span of his reality. A product of a past which is incumbent upon his father not understanding how to show up for his family because he is unaware of how to show up for himself. For his father was battling a generational philosophy that one ought to keep their head down and not talk about the internal pressures because putting food on the table and clothes on their backs were more important than your emotional allotment. Otherwise known as, quote, men don't cry, end quote. And subconsciously clothes himself and choose himself to leave his mental sanity. Ooh, excuse us. And subconsciously choose himself and leave to protect his mental sanity and so forth. Newsflash, men do cry because they're people, just like women, just like non-binary identifying individuals. We all should receive the same grace, as well as exhibit the same strength. This ain't no gender role shit. This is some humankind shit. And truth and love should be experienced by any and every body. Side note, don't let us get into our love of aspects of Jainism. They sweep the ground they walk on to not even hurt the bugs. Because without truth, we feel the need to lie. Whether out of self-preservation, fear of hurting the other with the consequences of truth, or whatever other reasons, we tell ourselves to commit the lie. Yet the truth is, we as human beings are just as self-destructive as we are self-enabling and powerful. Our minds allow us to be so. So even if you think protecting someone from the pain of reality by lying is a heroic enough act to commit the, quote, sin, unquote, of lying. Side note, sin is used loosely due to personal conflictions about the connotation of the word due to Christianity. Yeah, we're learning. It's vain to do so because that same someone can leave your conversation, walk outside, and be milled over by a kid with a bicycle or a car. Your truth, anyone's truth, is not the worst thing that can happen on this earth. Relax. You're taking your shit too serious, Mudgy. Who are you seriously protecting with your lives? them or you. So let's all just stop telling these little quote white unquote lies, especially the ones that allow us to feed into our manic and depressing habits that endorse our own sadness and discomfort. And understand that protecting yourself and others from your truth truly isn't helping anyone. Need more solutions? What about how to aid the personal development of the Black woman? And women for any woman for that matter. So to the women, get to an understanding that as much as it seems your job to heal the whole earth, whether that understanding is coerced or natural, real or imagined, you do have to show up for yourself first. Period. Side note, that's enough advice to chew on for a lifetime for some. Us included. So we shall go on. Show yourself love. Now, you don't have to look for it in a love's embrace, or you don't need to steal it out from over a woman's head in the style of deceit, sour words, or the attitude of the bitch. Trust us. People gonna hate on you either way, whether one is happy or conniving. So why choose to connive? Just because someone you held dear slighted you in the past. Our therapist said to stay in the past is to be depressed. To stay in the present is to choose and be aware of joy. And to stay in the future is to be anxious. Just because someone you loved took the heart you handed over oh so gingerly and lovingly, they took it and stomped on it. Side note, gruesome mental image, no? Why does being a hardened, stiff, untrusting, isolated being on this earth, who does it behoove? Who does being a hardened, stiff, untrusted, isolated being on this earth behoove? Do you really think the answer is you? Want a hint? Ask yourself if you're happy. Don't ask yourself if you're better like this and being sheltered is safer than open. Just if you're happy. Side note, address only the first feeling you felt. That's your truth. 'Tis probably why we say that it's not good to, quote, second guess, unquote, yourself. The first one is your truth, your instinct, your intuition. And there is a difference. So there's your answer. Side note, if you even stalled, bets on that you're not. And that's okay to acknowledge. It just means one needs to start on the wonderful journey of change and start choosing to live a better life. That's included. As women, we are bombarded to be beautiful and nurturing, breathtaking and soft. We are to be a haven to all who encounter us, which leads some of us to inquire, well, who will do the same for us? And the simple answer is your partner or your friends or whoever you ordained in your life to be the crux of emotional support that most of us as human beings need in our time on this earth. Emotional support that seems to disintegrate every day, by the hour, as we all become more and more withdrawn, maybe distrusting, maybe distant, or otherwise saddened after life's seemingly bitter experiences. Side note, or the false pretenses of the quote-unquote Joneses perpetuated over social media. Or better put, as we choose to be saddened, withdrawn, distrusting, distant, etc. Because joy is a choice. And though pain will come, choosing to stay in suffering is a choice. And as Black women, we're taught to be strong, so strong that we aren't even supposed to expect anyone to come to our aid, ever. No one. And sometimes, especially not the Black man. He's got his own shit and seems to expect a mother type or a piece of ass on legs. Side note, this shit really blows us. Yet it's crazy talk to even debate the truth of this fallacious ass thought. Like, can I/we get love as strong, capable women too? Of course. Just because we can open our own pickle jars and handle a tube and handle a gun. Just because we don't need you, we still want love. We still deserve love. We are equal. Being apart caused us both to fend for ourselves. It's all in the name of mutual beneficial and understanding relationships now. So, he seems too busy handling the strain of the world, being bred to think he's a killer from the time he can tie a shoestring. And the lack of self-love that is born within one who never saw what self-love as a Black man even looks like. Besides acquiring a collection or a plethora of women and nice material assets to be her aid. And especially we need to understand that of the gay Black woman. Side note, let the Black church's scoffs be heard in harmony. We can see a Black woman with a debonair church hat sitting tight-lipped, clutching her fan with all the anguish she feels inside from the social learning of the wrongness of this loving, gay, Black relationship. Keynote on intentional use of the phrases, quote, loving relationship, end quote, and, quote, social learning, end quote. Because we don't know whose God is being served sometimes. For we see and we're taught that God is love and loves all, period. Even the gays, because they were created too. We are created and in multiplicity. So their partners were created too, with intention. If it was such an abomination, why are there so many of us? You saying God makes mistakes? No. And if anything, we theorize that the reason that non-heterosexual love is a, quote, sin, end quote, is because the love does not naturally, quote unquote, beget offspring, which is always the set mission at some point in life, i.e., quote, be fruitful and multiply, end quote. Newsflash, not everybody wants to have kids, Karen. Not everybody can have kids, Karen. So lighten up. See, the gay Black woman, she's too busy handling the strain of feeling as if her very existence is an abomination to the God in which she loves dear, due to the mechanics of the church she was raised to obey, while also trying to keep the antics of being unhinged by the instability of the Black men she has seen growing up, buried behind her deprecative humor that, quote, niggas ain't shit, end quote. Or she has to deal with the antics of whatever relational mishap and occurrence that have been pushed upon her or witnessed in her lifetime. While we're at it, we can add that second pretense regarding, quote, niggas ain't shit, end quote, to the reasons as to why Black women can't even base the efforts of their emotional support upon other straight Black women. In additional words, as a Black woman, it's harder than it honestly needs to be to show your emotional tenses to even your very own. because we all are facing issues of not handling our emotions and showing our truths in the right moments. The moments that call for our openness are met with frigidity and lies. And we are scarred to even more fearful isolation and distrust in its wake. What is needed is more emotional intelligence. The ability to know when to say what in what way at the correct time. When to hug, when to cry, when to listen, etc. We should not only expect this of the therapist. As individuals, we are as much the root of our destruction as the key to our benevolent and best existence. And as Black people, we are as much in the best moment of our lives and past of our ancestors in terms of capability as we are in some pretty shitty times. It is truly only perspective. It's based on how one looks at things. In this age, we have more access than we legally have had in the decades, especially centuries, since we have been on this planet, we believe. Yet, the same illnesses and lesser ways of livelihood still torment us that have for decades and centuries before. Our eating habits, a low sense of self, a distrust of others outside and inside family. Side note, we are not going to skip past that these are very well and most likely directly derivatives of learned behaviors from surviving slavery for centuries. Do you acknowledge that? Centuries. We were taught to eat scraps of animals and no plants because we didn't have access to them or know how to grow them, for the most part. Yes, we did have gardens for those who knew how to upkeep them. We were taught to have a low sense of self because if you had pride, you were broken and humiliated expeditiously. And your peers probably did it before the master did. Some out of fear of your and their protection, and some just out of spite and lack within themselves. We can see why then we had these hardened lives and thoughts about ourselves, life, and others, and even in the present day, the environments of the ghettos, slums. The theme of no access has definitely continued, but we aren't enslaved anymore. We are bound only as long as we choose to be. But who better to suggest that solution than the most established student to experience the perils of the problem? Or, in another way, how can the invader tell the invaded what is best for their livelihood? Side note, cough, cough. Learn from our ancestors and histories and stop letting people outside of your environment tell you what is best for you and it, especially if they're not thinking, moving, acting in respect of / for you. Otherwise, if they are for you, be open to suggestions. One can avoid a briar's pitfalls if one listens to the briar's tales. The world needs an audit. The community. Speaking of environments and communities, let's discuss how the complete obsolescence of them can be so destructive on the mental recesses of those impressionable within the community. It shows that the nature of the enabler behind their diminishing nature is innately supercilious. Ever notice how on, quote, one side of the train tracks, end quote, a euphemism that denotes planned obsolescence of living environments, homes and spaces based on wealth and ability / access to maintenance. The area is clean, bright, filled with landscape art of choice, i.e. green spaces of astonishing design, nearly buzzing with happiness and opportunity. Meanwhile, quote, across the tracks, end quote, i.e., the location of comparatively mediocre land, upkeep, and access, the dilapidated streets and trash strewn about, and wild abandon shows the nature in which is wanted to be felt by those who masterminded the area's purpose in the first place. Abandonment of hope and lack of care for the future of its inhabitants. And for those that disagree, one question. Do you think that anyone who cares about the welfare of a section of people who place them in an area that is consistently with contaminated water, little to no food security, and disregarded public spaces like parks and buildings? Solution. Understand that ownership is key. The truth of the matter is that in the business of money and time, it's important to note that we are in the realm of man-made stresses because these things are not involved in the true happiness or success. Closed mouths don't get fed. Or better yet, closed mouths don't get heard, which shows as the constituents of the area being disregarded because no one in the community knows how to show up and be counted in the legal measures that ascertain acknowledgement of those needs of that community. We're simply not in the rooms, or invited in the rooms, or taught the languages of the rooms. So, enter the census, legal sessions, State of the Unions, town hall, etc. Previously, we were legally bound from entering these places. Now, sometimes we simply don't know where to go and how to show up. Nonetheless, we have to figure out how to deal with the other. And in our minds, quote, more important, end quote, dealings of life. To take pride in our community is the goal. It's the return of the feeling of community. Like when the old folks talk of the times when you could trust a neighbor because you knew them. Now, in the world that intermingles itself evermore in every waking moment. Side note, like those wired headphones which were so outrageous we had to invent the wireless Bluetooth ones that took the tech world by storm. Your neighbor may be from a whole different country, halfway across the world, yet that's okay. Because regardless of country of origin, if you're blessed to know, side note, and trust, as a Black woman whose past was flushed down the proverbial toilet due to our ancestors being reduced to numbers, and then faded into negligence due to family ties being disparaged by the lack of community or not wanting to talk of the traumas that were faced. Family stories washed away like rain. Kinda exactly like the American prison system and its fetish with Black people being in chains. And, quote, natural, unquote, fires destroying census records. It's a privilege to know who we are. It's our birthright, too. We're all just people who want to feel safe, loved, and respected, and who wouldn't want to enjoy a neighborhood block party with amazing food and laughter every once in a while. Who wouldn't? The sense of community needs to be restored. And how to do so? A neighborhood garden, a biannual block party, rebuilding and maintaining a landmark in the community. Side note, this brings value to the area and surrounding property. A market square event where local entrepreneurs can sell their goods and foods and people can commune. A community dance-a-thon. Side note, a wonderful way to raise money for something your community needs while also reintroducing fun exercise to the elders and people and youth. Well, elders, youth, people, we all people in the community. There's so many. And the cause is so integral. For it truly does take a village to raise a child. And if the village is broken, what do we truly believe will become of its children? Yeah, we'll let you decide on that matter. The world needs an audit. Part 2. The world needs an audit. The countries that are our sisters. We like the idea of thinking about the other countries that also inhabit the earth. Sierra Leone, Botswana, Nigeria, London, India. Well, that's not a country. India, Taiwan, etc. as sister countries and sister states. Like those distant, quote-unquote, cousins in the family who no one truly knows who they came from or how on earth they relate to you and your fam, but hey, we all kin of the same family tree at the end of the day, so it's all groovy type of way. Side note, ask Lucy, the first upright primate in Africa from which we all are just spiraling, diversifying, and DNA manipulating bloodlines of. That's your belief. Side note, do other cultures act like this to those random folk in the fam that show up on Thanksgiving or Aunt Tabby's birthday? No? Is it just us as Black people? Because we're betting on that. It's a derivative of the behavior that, quote, Big Mama, unquote, i.e. the present-day matriarch of most Black families, and even the matriarchy of our ancestral tribes, could be based on the head matriarch of the plantation that had to mother, organize, and care for the majority that were near her. You care for someone with that much love and obligation in your heart, what truly differs or matters, whether if they are by blood or bond, literally. They know that we're all in this together, so we all might as well bond. So anyway, the sister countries are the subject here. Let's start with a large problem. The molestation of the West African plains for the use of its precious minerals that are mined for the creation of our cell phones and technical devices. Place, the Democratic Republic of Congo. Details: in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, an area that is incredibly rich in natural resources, yet incredibly, by our first world definition, poor in social capita, i.e. GDP of the people who actually inhabit the land, has been ravaged for its natural resources since it was discovered in the colonial grab bag that occurred and split Africa into the countries that we refer by today. History tell. In the 1800s, some countries from Europe came into Africa and decided that they were going to own it. That's pretty much the audacity and scale of the situation. They split tribes down the middle just to establish country lines to their self-interest that led to territorial war, between former kin later. Yet what concern did that pose to the Europeans who were able to section off geographic areas that proved lucrative and more pleasing to them? Side note, gerrymandering, anyone? Redlining? It was previously pillaged by Belgium for its ivory. Side note, rest in peace to the elephants and the humanly slain for their cartilage, i.e. tusk, and rubber from the sap of their trees. The Congo is now pillaged by China. Good old China. Side note, we will always give notice where notice is due, and China was and is very intelligent to be the threshold for the materials of our economy. Anyone who is anyone in this commerce world knows that it's integral to be a producer and not a consumer. 'Tis how you make money, or more so, make it back to make more. And what better producer is there than to be the wholesaler of the material for which the part is made, for which the whole product is made, for which is what is packaged and sold to you in by stores and entrepreneurs worldwide. Genius. Not saying we love it. Genius. Highly questionable population birth control tactics. Yet genius and crazy go hand in hand without balance and grounding, as Van Gogh's left ear. So here's our solution. Africa, we need to have ownership over the materials that are being born out of the very ground we walk on, have grown from, and have our ancestors and blood directly traced to. The very ground that has been the crux and birth of civilization. Side note, have y'all truly seen how wonderful Africa is? Like, yeah, and propagandist media is bullshitting with only showing the destitution and fly-invested waters that they have, aided. So, the very ground that holds the River Nile, which completes the scientifically unfathomable feat of flowing upwards, yes, from south to north, against what we understand as gravity pulling things down, especially north to south. The very ground that holds the animals whose skeletons have been broken apart and sold as precious materials, adornments, and keepsakes. Side note, talking ivory here. Yet, if you yourself know any other case in which the affirmation statement relates, Lord of mercy, period. The very ground from which, on a rainy day, the elements can erode the topsoil layer to unearth to the nearest visible eye beautiful stones worked by the pressures of earth. Stones that were, quote, beautified, end quote. Side note, remember, it is all only perspective, even that adjective. By being mutilated and mutated out of its previous form, because the earth knows what it knows and knew the stone could handle the metamorphosis and be a, quote, better, unquote, form of itself. Side note, a wonderful allegory to the strides of life, anyone? The purpose of our trials and tribulations? No? Just us? Well, we'll just keep our nature-derived philosophies and revelations over here then. Or we might just write another book. Or make a cartoon. We don't know yet. Moving onward. Stones that, by no immediate innate property, makes them more valuable than the dirt we walk on, the air we breathe, the green of the earth, is simply chosen to be valuable. It's not even necessarily sublime demand. There are far more diamonds in the soul than we admit to the public. Shit, there are way more pearls in the world than the commercial price of the gatekeeper will admit. Pearls are literally the result of an irritant to an oyster being encapsulated by the materials natural to the oyster. That's right. A pearl is an encapsulated irritant, a beauty of nature produced in completion to a common issue of life, removing an irritation. Oysters just make pearls out of those that irritate them. Shit's pretty cool. That's a life lesson in and of itself. So simply, because of their value, and the fact that not everybody has access to the precious material, unlike our precious air, water, and earth, side note, in the current economy, we have realized that water is becoming no longer as accessible as it should be, as in other natural elements. And what most have said about, quote, New World water, end quote, shall be coming true if it already hasn't. Most of Yassine Bey, we honor both forms of you, sir. It is said, it is sold, because who is anyone in the commerce world? It is sold, and because anyone who is anyone in the commerce world understands the headache of overhead costs and the never-ending quest to question how to nearly eradicate it, or at least lower it to a near negligible amount, for it occurs to just about any solid businesswoman or person. But this is business, I guess. And in business, commerce, and trade, the bottom line has become what solely matters. It's capitalism. Babylon, the many names to refer to it. Fuck the lives it may cost. Fuck the families it may put under strain. Fuck the human emotional consequence that shall follow the economic decisions. If it's not spoken and heard, the issue does not seem to exist. The focus is on the money that needs to be made. And cheap labor is a wonderful solution to the overhead expense of production costs. Yet this is enslavement. It's treating a life as if it's merely a number and not a soul with a home, life, wife, husband, lover, kids, family, and dreams. And it's inhumane. And this is what is happening in the cobalt mines in the Congo and in the prisons of America, whose free labor supply most large companies with what opposite forces they need to put their products on the shelves quicker, cheaper, and more abundantly. Side note. And we are sure this is happening in many other areas around the world. Latin America, Middle East, East Atlantic, East Asiatic societies, Australia, etc. Wherever there is a hierarchy in the people and society that makes one class of people notably, quote, lesser than, quote, another group, as long as that ideology exists within us, we will always tend to excuse that someone is deserving of a more punishable, arduous life than, quote unquote, others. Whomever, quote unquote, others may denote based on the terms of your society. Quote, others, unquote, are the higher-ups, those who are looked upon as, quote, chosen, unquote, or that life just dealt them a, quote unquote, better hand of cards than others. Yet more often than not, they just, quote unquote, choose. We need to stop belittling the access to provide a good life in exchange for something as material as a commerce item. Something a company can add to its portfolio to either sell to the highest bidder or get employees through the door, because we become our own best enemy, if we haven't already. So here's an identity to this math problem. We tend to believe that we can choose whether someone is less than us based off of measures on our own conscious human brain. Our own conscious human brain can conspire. We're going to run that back. So here's an identity to this math problem. We tend to believe that we can choose whether someone is less than us based off of measures of our own conscious human brain that we can conspire, that we can think of. Side note, we want to make it very clear that we are referring only to the conscious mind. The subconscious would quickly eradicate the thought because it understands that hierarchy does not exist. Horizontal relationships don't exist. They're all vertical and equal. We're all one. Only an ego does it have merit. Then we can exploit them. Based off those measures, we exploit. Here is an identifiable solution. It shall be a theme going forward, so we want to make this clear. We are definitely at a time in which the earth needs a protective and definitive voice on ethicism. In lesser terms, we need a group that audits the nations. The group makes sure that we don't pollute too much, to populate the earth of its natural resources too much, have wars too much, things like that. Side note, we want to note that we wouldn't have to have such a group if morality and judgment were practiced more often and more amicably by ourselves as individuals. Yet, for the most part, it isn't. Self-policy is sometimes barely a thing. Judgment is used in nearly every other place than where it should be. And the lack of trust that is spreading like a venereal disease at a high school football summer camp that coincided the same week as cheer camp is gonna kill us all before any bacteria does. But once again, who are we to say these things? We just absorb and learning to observe instead of absorb what's around us. So for argument's sake, and to avoid confusion by talking so general, let's say the United Nations is or has such a group. They can write a book on how we can and need to save the earth, so we think it's not too far-fetched to ideate that they can also have a division to handle the human divisions of these quote-unquote United Nations that populate the earth, if they haven't already. And if they already do, well, we hope it's just that we haven't heard of all the good they're achieving in the fields of human rights as it relates to all the humans, regardless of creed, race, ethnicity, gender, and all the other lovely terms that are included in every non-discrimination policy that presides an institution on this planet. From observation, the way to curb the capitalism of the world is create a fee that no monetary coercion can change. Tax them per ethical disruption. Or figure the Achilles heel of the corporate and prod it. So anywho, solution. To the mining exploitation in Congo. Someone, not in the government, because we all have become aware of how bloated with one-sided bureaucracies and convoluted tyrannies it currently is, who knows the science and systems of the mines like the back of their hands, needs to partner with someone with money, someone who won't undermine him, and get ownership of the land that the precious materials come out of. Ownership in the sake of business. Of course, we are not here to own Earth. Yes, we are yet mere humans and are subservient to the land and what it allows us to enjoy. But in the convoluted ways that mass commercialism has made the world, ownership has become key. To garner the upper hand, one must be proficient and knowledgeable in the ways of this opponent. One must be in front of the law to stop being squelched by it. So that team that now has ownership of the land, of the mines, the miner with the intellect and gusto and the money man with good intention, needs to construct a deal with the cobalt mining companies of the world to continue the mining under negotiated terms. The terms should at least include that the mining practices that are condoned needs to at least be humane. Basic protection gear and practices should be utilized to improve the health conditions of the miners and their families. And the mining company must get a permit from the city it is closest to, if it is within a conflicting distance to the mining site, and clearly state that the airborne minerals lead to physiological hardships more times than none. And what does this permit specify? That the town gives the company the permission to mine in that area, and that the decision be made on the information known that the release of materials from the ground will be done in a way that will reduce air pollution, which could affect the health of people in the nearby towns. That the excavation of materials will be done in a way that will be aware and avoid triggering physical alteration of the area that will affect the city, i.e. landslides, earthquakes, etc. That the workers for the mining operation will be humanely treated and humanely recruited from the village of those nearby, and that they are compensated properly to maintain a state of livelihood that is helpful to the family of the worker, and so on and so forth as needed for that township. Side note, on a lesser scale, it's like over here in America, where a food truck has to ask the ownership of the restaurant owner who owns the portion of asphalt that the truck wishes to sit on for permission to operate. And the permission is granted based on the terms that the restaurant owner doesn't feel any major forms of conflict between them and the truck owner. Otherwise, the operation is immediately halted, or at least the infringer is fined to all get out. So yes, this company could simply own the land, or it could be the not-so-humble beginning of mining associations and our unions, and continues to do so and protect those facing similar conditions elsewhere. And here's a knockout: fines. It might as well be a death note on the door of corporations, because as soon as they're able, everything is done to receive the help and deceptive practices that know how to evade them. It would be impertinent that the mining association then fines the company if they break the rules of the agreement that he signed to. Like majorly fined. And legally backed, majorly fined. Legally backed to the point that it doesn't matter how new of a company it may be, to scoff at the repercussions of ignoring such a fine is legal action. And the courts are well established and do not come into play. Side note. And also, just learning from the history of the Americas and several wrongful convictions and drops that were made in the court systems due to the corrupt justices and unbalanced groups of jurors, the final court to be called in question, if people just fuck up the pure nature and intention of law just to fuel their own individual needs, they should be housed in the United Nations, or whoever this group of ethical, and everyone knows they're ethical, beings are. We see it as being very possible, this ethical legal group. We're quite sure of that. If there can be, out of awareness for the nature in which large technology companies are capable of becoming, born organizations like a Center for Humane Technology, more on a suggestion of what they can do in their quest later, then there can be a large ethical group of lawyers who handle the cases that are built and understood to be against human rights, to a good life, liberty, and pursuit of non-damaging to the rights of others, happiness. Of course, to ensure that such a grand legal case does not get interrupted by poor balance that can sometimes be found in unfair legal institutions. Side note, the term unfair is used here in the denotative sense that truly means the inverse of fair, not the connotative sense of the word thrown about by human beings old and young who aren't getting their individualistic way of life. The case is then tracked by such an ethical legal institution, so therefore they are not bombarded with every case to work on directly, yet the pure stamp of their name on that case may simply be filed in the pending drawers in similar cases of such high ethical magnitude. Instills a magnanimous feeling in the parties involved that doing the ethical, moral, and fair practices are more or less understood as the only action that is allowed that doesn't involve the complete depletion of the infringing company's pockets. And what are they going to do if the infringer feels slighted? Sue an ethical division of lawyers that are kin to the United Nations? Side note, at this point, they can try, but for what? Ensuring that the practices done by the infringer does not lead to the death, destruction, or otherwise painful manipulation of individualistic individualistic lives just to lower their bottom line at the end of Q4. Explain that to their plummeting stock price and or their diminishing public image, which enables them to get service and consumers in the first place. Every giant has an Achilles heel. David taught us that. And for any business, it's the ability to produce a profit. Wants another solution? The world needs an audit. The technological giants. While we're at it, let's discuss the state of the technological union and the rise of the de facto governments that we pleasantly call, quote, tech giants, unquote. As an engineer by trade and a lover of invention and creation, we were naturally drawn to technology as a kid. How it can move a fan in a paced circular motion if you point a black rectangle with buttons at it, otherwise known as a remote. And how that metal and wood contraption can spin at speeds that look faster than most commercial car wheels, yet not fling off and decapacitate the head of the lovely human that just wants to enjoy some mechanically manipulated cool air while they read their favorite book, or scroll on one of their favorite digitized mechanical gadgets that fit in the palm of their hand, otherwise known as a phone. It was amazing to come to understand that the reason that fan did not make Sunday morning a scene out of a scary movie is because a balance between energy and forces. Side note, enter how becoming a student of technology and sciences actually kickstarted our spiritual journey as a child here. That and healing and making mud pies in the backyard. A balance of energy and forces. Push and pull. Torque and centrifugal force. Gravity and acceleration. That undo the limitations of its pair is duality, so that the previously impossible is now a mere antiquated thought because it exists in front of you. So just imagine our surprise when we're at the point in our career where we can make 6 figures out of college for being a kid in a proverbial candy store, surrounded by technology and a capability. Yet we just reached a point in our history where technology is beginning to eerily look like the self-fulfilling robots that take over the world and artificial intelligence that unhinge and are proficient in the scary movies of the 80s and 90s. You know the scenes? Robots coming alive and capping individuals just because the code within them identifies such people as a threat that needs to be eradicated. Are aliens coming to attack and speak because we are unknowingly or knowingly dismantling the balance of ways that affect them in our never-ending search for knowledge and invention, which begets the search for knowledge and invention onwards into infinity, and the infinities after that. Newsflash. A developer, if they really wanted to, can develop a code in which a face can be screened, identified, then compared to a database of faces previously uploaded. And upon comparison to the bank of faces that are deemed to be called threatening, can identify that other face as just as threatening. They can do just that. And from there, the possibilities are endless. The face could then be tracked, and with the joy that is face screening present on most smart devices nowadays, can be traced across the world, with not just the phone that's in his, her, or their pockets, but also other phones capturing photos in which they may be in the foreground and background of, message threads and IP locations, basic surveillance cameras. We hope you're seeing how deep this gets. Point is that robot probably already exists in basic or completed construction somewhere, and is contracted by someone who dabbles in machinery as well as data science, or created by the governments themselves. The purpose of the government is to always stay one step ahead of the people, right? Otherwise, and really think about it, they'd fail. The point is, organizations like the Center for Human Technology and others are more than necessary. Center for Humane Technology, excuse us. And here is a solution to the problem that is faced. A data asset tax. What do we mean necessarily? Simple. Side note, simplicity is truly the best way. So a data asset tax. A tax on a piece of datum that is utilized by that company. The definition of datum is what is needed to be decided, as well as the amount that is permissible. It seems pertinent that the amount should be determinate about the wealth that the organization has. The more revenue, not profits, which allows a large company to dispose of their mass fortunes as a non-profits of their choice, yet truly still be in utilization of it if it's in a foundation or otherwise internally managed not-for-profit corporation, the company ascertains from the use and or sale of data needs to be taxed at the year end. At the time of year end and filing, where all the numbers are not only surmised yet verified, the quantity of data that have been accessed throughout that year should be gathered, then multiplied per a decided rate that would be the cost of data. This cost could be small or large, yet it should comprise, of the understanding that data is now just another renewable resource within the world. And though no one may be able to control it, we all harness it. Side note, just like water and oil, no? One renewable, one non-renewable, both mandated if used inappropriately. We harness it when we track our miles to see our mileage improvement, when we are attempting to best ourselves in the name of fitness. We harness it when we decide on an area to bomb, for it will harness the most damage to the hearts and minds of those who call them kin and countrymen. When we are attempt to break the morals of countries during war to create the nature of dominance. Data is not just as is, if not more, precious as diamonds. Or thought to be so, than access to clean water. And it needs to be monitored before history repeats itself. And just like in the case of others, we are facing a conflict to our ways of life as monstrous as the pandemic that tore apart the fabrics of our existence in a matter of months due to the influences and confusions of fake news, fascism in politics, and the hiding of the quantifiable truth once it surmounted the biggest dangerous epidemic, fear. We are coming to a time where we feel like the earth is ending and changing as we know it. Again, just like in the year when the Mayan calendar was predicted the world to end. Just like in the year 1999. Just like in the years, decades, and millenniums before, no doubt. But this time feels different. Maybe it's just because we're all here living through it. At the same time as the contagion affects the planet and plummets us into isolation within our homes, if we're blessed to have one. Some homes that are the same homes that were ran away from to protect the minds, hearts, and bodies that have been ravished, emasculated, pillaged, raped, dehumanized, and more by those who used to hate living in them. At the same time, that mental illness seems to be at an all-time high, along with babies being born with physical illnesses that are inherited from parents, whether it be genetics, breast milk, or living in and within or under identical nurtures. Mental illnesses are affecting those younger and younger, perhaps because the world in all of its ways enter our homes and minds of our youth at younger and younger ages. There are toddlers, side note, there are toddlers that know how to utilize technological devices that their grandparents don't even understand. And mind you, the grandparents of this generation are only 45 or so nowadays, which is not old. That's only the 80s or so. We do not instill the fortitude in their minds yet to defeat the terrors of the world. The fact that some people do choose to be dangerous, that some people do choose to be conniving, that some people will tear your love of self apart proudly, for misery loves company, and someone came along before you and fucked them up to an extent where they now choose to, consciously or subconsciously, to do the exact same to others. It's not their fault. Maybe it is. Because whether you believe it or not, there are occurrences that show that eating better heals your body of all man-made illnesses, and few aren't man-made. Illnesses of the mind, of the heart, the body. And nearly all diseases are derivative of what you put in your stomach. The second brain being in our gut, which is like the mitochondria and chloroplasts of plants. All energy that's needed to survive is birthed there. And whether you believe it or not, the way that other people treat you is more of a reflection of the inner divisions or healings dealt by that individual. Not necessarily what you did to said individual in the moments prior to the reaction. We attract our reflections. That causation and correlation really are a thing and can be confused for each other in nearly every life discipline and existential situation. And whether you believe it or not, one will always get what they are dealt. If one does wrong shall surely get dealt back to them to the degree in which the pain was intended, and perhaps even inflicted, regardless of intention, if it turns to be worse. Unless such a person corrects such an action with a benevolent action of equal or greater degree. Whatever you believe, understand that the earth has been on a fringe several times before. Think of the dinosaurs and the proverbial comet that led to their distinction. Intense displays of powers that seem to be unable to be properly derailed and attained by some display of balance is dealt with. Think of the flood that induced the second coming of humanity as we knew it. So we, as mere humans, are not going to desecrate the earth to oblivion as the media may fear, and therefore project to us to fear as well. If anything, the world will unleash a natural phenomenon to the extent to where life as we know it will pause or indefinitely terminate to exist. And after life stills, order will arise, as it always does, with a new apex, and its disturbance, its balance, will also be created, and the world will enter its new era. So if you're like us, take care of your block. Make it a haven again, to whatever extent that means to you. That does not inflict pain, suffering, or otherwise negativity on your neighbors. Understand that one's improvement does not directly constitute another party's deterioration. Balance does not work in such immediate cases like that. If everyone who lived took care and found the means to protect and care for the areas that housed their neighbors and those that had the gusto, self-belief, and or natural ability, because that is truly the difference between a leader and the non, acted on their dreams and placed intentions, whether that be to create beautiful art, to become provisional agent in their community to ensure everyone gets the resources needed. That's us. Construct beautiful buildings that more people can house themselves in, that are of varied amounts, so classism and wealth of livelihood are not synonymous, and so much more. You are all given something to do, a dream. And that dream may be dashed by those around us just because other people may not see it like you do. Or your dream can be attained within the pace of time that you subscribe to and your beliefs, to the operation of it. Overnight successes may be few, and employment, not all just those that give no extraneous time to the expressions of their desires. It's for those who don't wish to attain it enough. And that's okay. The point is, life can be simple. From pulling fruit from the trees with your homie, from when the rooster crows to dancing the night away at dance halls every day, to being a struggling parent with billions in the bank, yet no time to spend with family and a monstrous bill on your health. One can be fruitful and multiply, whether that be babies, businesses, or new philosophies or not. Yet we all know that feeling of emptiness when we don't do something that we're supposed to do. How long do you think the distractions, oversexing or overdrinking or serial series of relationships or running away or overworking or overeating or overachieving or insert default trait of distraction for fulfillment here will last? Don't be burned by your own light. The world needs an audit. Mental illness, neurodivergence. We need to stop regarding mental illnesses as if they are untouchable people. Side note, the fact that some believe that any such thing should exist makes us subject to never dismiss the unbalance in our relationships. What happened to, quote, treat others how you wanted to be treated, end quote. It really seems to be, more so, that the individual who now deals with neurodivergent behaviors is just dealing with the world in the capacity that they can. Some may develop into such from birth, whether you believe it to be from genetics, poor nutrition, or just insert your preferred philosophy here. Some develop into it midlife, whether by nutrition, overall health, including spiritual, or trauma. Either way, the way we respect, or the lack thereof in many cases, those who deal with mental illnesses needs to be looked at. Why, on this beautiful earth, is there a belief that those who are mentally ill and on the streets should be left there? Side note, don't we all understand that life's choices can happen to any of us? That truly no one is above another? That we are all of equal respect and capability? That if the ways of life that put some in castles and others in gutters and strangers' doorsteps, some in loving relationships from the first steps, and others in abusive relationships so terrible that one just has to accept one's worth and what one prefers to deserve to leave. Some in loving two-parent households, some between homes until one is old enough to get fed up, leave, and be blessed to get their own. Some blessed to know their soul friends in life from the age of 2, and some who tended to believe they're a loner and jump friend group to friend group until they meet the group of nomads that perfectly match them. And so many more. Insert all the possible occurrences that can manifest in this life and also ideate of the inverse. This world may be terrible or as lovely as you demand it to be to you, as you will it to be to you. Demand, some refer to it as intention, for it always comes to you. Intend for a day to be glorious, and even a weight dropping on your foot won't even faze you. Don't think so? Ask the optimist. Think ever presently that this world is a terrible, dangerous, bastardly, dank, evil, hate-filled, loveless, broken, or insert negative synonymously themed phrase or word here, and your days will surely make sure you resent life and all of its inhabitants. You decide. So now let's all realize that a lot more people are depressed than what's quantified. People are depressed all the time, a lot of the time. Ask anyone dealing with their first heartbreak, like they just conk out. That's depression. Or ask someone who knows they need to quit their job, yet seems to subconsciously stay determined that this is the best that they can do and just look dead in their eyes. So hush. Everyone deals with mental dis-ease every now and again. For dis-ease of the mind can mean the loss of balance between our spiritual and physical entities. Your body, the physical, encases them together, which can be why it's so important to treat mental disease much better. We need to heal them, all of them, from the wealthy to those on the street. Side note, sick of pinning that. We have a homeless rehabilitation proposition that may be of interest. Feed them well, let them sleep, let them sun, let them commune. Reassert their belief in their own abilities to supply provision. Side note, in the most unhippie way, yeah, you know we love a hippie. Only so, one may not discredit the otherwise solid suggestion above. Community seriously heals a lot of shit. Feel alone? Community. True community. Falling serially into relationships because you are subconsciously fighting a self-love and esteem battle? Better community. Work too much? Need better community to remind you how amazing life is. Just being your best self. Okay. Carrying on. Let them share stories. Feel less alone. Give them a nice makeover. Remind them of themselves, etc. Rehabilitate them. Just realize that this is a human who is having a more intense time than you, simply being. Or remember that this is a human whose life has become so tumultuous that they don't trust anyone. Anxiety, trust issues, etc. Side note, we simply hypothesized that anxiety related to public could not be trusting one's self-image in the eyes of others. Anxiety in the era of the future could be not trusting one's path is self-determined, or is guided, or both, and succumb themselves to the foundationless feeling of not having trust in one's own strength and actions, etc. Or that they don't sleep anymore, or that they don't love anymore, and become either deadened or embittered, or that they walk with a distant glassy look in their eye, whether in intense euphoria or intense depression. Mental illness can be viewed as a way that the person has come to deal with life and its hardships. So we need to heal them, not mentally banish them and help them barely from behind closed doors as if not to upset our delicate, privileged, and able-bodied stomachs after dinner. We need to do better. The purpose of life, for your life, is your purpose. This chapter shall be simple. We like to write in a continuous thought of flow and letting the ink capture it like the candid frozen on the film of Polaroid. Yet for some reason, a good reason no doubt, we couldn't finish this one for you. Perhaps this topic is open to personal interpretation. Get out of the mindset that anyone external to you can tell you what your purpose in life is. You have to sit still enough, long enough to remember what joy feels like, what it felt like, and where you found it, and follow that. Or let that friend that has historically acted as a mirror for you and knows your soul, and you know this without a doubt, let you reflect with them. Epilogue. All the thoughts we stuck a pin in. The will to live. Oof. Let us just tell you that God be knowing. This book was written in 2 sessions, the initial meet and the edited version. Initially, we didn't explain. Yet now, life has done us in a doozy, and we're still learning to let go. So this is what we've come to understand. If you choose to focus on the losses in life, it shall primarily or only beget more losses. Example, if you sit in depression and let life go by because you are emotionally open, then wrecked by loss after loss after loss after loss, you get the picture. You'll wither away while the love that is to heal you sits in the background, unnoticed by the cataract of your own pain. You, me, we all have to learn to let go. Is it easy? The word, quote, easy, unquote, in and of itself is perspective. Think of it like this. How long do you want to stay hidden? From your blessings, from love, from success, from vitality, from happiness that rests only and entirely in forgiveness and acceptance. Learn to let go, love. See the world for how beautiful it still is, even with all its shitty parts. You've reached the part of the relationship where you see the ass of what you love. True love is acceptance and staying to love anyway. Greener grass. The grass really isn't greener on the other side. Check your eyes and remember they can play tricks on us too sometimes. And that it is dependent on the vitality of our minds. The grass is greener where it's tended to. The Joneses just have more time or assistance to water their grass. Or maybe they just got that fake turf and never told nobody. Covet not. You may never know the basis of the things you wish you had. Is it fragile? Is it whole? Is it based in love? Or is it based in perception? Taste the rainbow. If you don't know if you're gay or not, most likely you are. All the shame in the world, all the blame in the world, all the disdain in the world, and surely not your death if you're questioning it will change that. If you need it, seek help. The Trevor Project comes to mind. Release all the projected fears, worries, and bashings that were put on to you and remind yourself people's opinions are as equal to their own fears as much as reciprocated to you to deal with them. Stop taking love advice from people who do not have strong, truthful base in relationship, and especially from those who's not been in an honest and open one before. Taste the rainbow, love. Stick your face in it. Will people think you lost your socially trained mind? Maybe. Yet, happiness shines out of someone like love on a February weekend. Shit blinds those who have not been accustomed to it and warms those who are open and knowledgeable of it. Your care should not warrant you broken in any way. And that perhaps pertains to the gay-ass rainbow, as well as the rainbow possibility that is life. Find your rainbow, please, and dance in the joy of the rays of the sun that produce it, and realize that the sun is within you. It is you. The Homeless Rehabilitation Project. This is a whole book, coming soon. Yet for now, realize that the coins and dollars asked for are not them just trying to get over on you to get some drugs. At least we shouldn't assume it's all the time. Some shelters charge by the week to house the homeless. Some can stay in motels. Some need to feed their families and themselves by themselves. And that is what the money is going to. Stay tuned.